My essay is on the intersection between oil wealth and illicit financial flows in Nigeria. A common phenomenon which has become a contested fact today is that natural resources of most developing countries of the world have become a driving force for sustained poverty, armed conflict, and illicit financial flows. Crude oil, for instance, in Nigeria is Nigeria's richest resource. But however, this resource has been encroached upon by pervasive political corruption, illegal bunkering, armed conflict, and internal violence, among other things. Crude oil theft alone amounts to $6 billion annually, representing 10% of illicit financial flow in Africa. This exposes the country to macro political risk of economic instability and also increasing their level of chronic poverty and episodic conflicts. Nigeria lost a total of $217 billion to illicit financial flow between 2017 and 2018. Net 2.9% of this loss was linked to fraudulent practices in the national oil and gas industry, whereas 5% were driven by corruption and other forms of bribe. These stolen funds are way higher than Nigeria's net official development assistance and official aid received, according to the World Bank official reports. Before we forge ahead, I would like us to grab basic understanding of some conceptual definitions here. Start with oil theft. The United Nations on Drugs and Crime and the London School of Economics define oil theft as the practice of stealing and trafficking oil not only in Nigeria but across West African countries and the world at large. Crude oil is being stolen on an industrial scale, and proceeds are stolen through world financial centers and used to buy assets in and outside Nigeria. For the purpose of this paper, oil theft is defined as any illegal activity that is associated with the discovery, refining, selling, and usage of oil resources, which include vendorism, tax evasion and transfer pricing, illicit export of crude oil, bribery for oil license, contracts, and money laundering perpetrated by some politically exposed person. There are different stages of oil theft in the supply chain as enumerated in the diagram here. Oil theft starts from the onshore oil well down to the final stage of oil refinery. We see different stages where oil theft occur, starting from like I said, from the onshore oil well to gathering process station, oil pipeline, crude oil storage, and among other stages of oil theft. And this oil theft can be in form of fuel smuggling, adulteration and distribution, artisan refinery, among other forms of oil theft. Next is oil boom narrative, the origin of illicit financial flows in Nigerian petroleum sector. Nigeria found crude oil in 1956 at Oluebube, Bayelsa State in the Niger Delta, and joined the ranks of top oil producers in the world after 50 years of oil exploration by the British colonial government. Within 13 years of oil discovery, the nation has produced over 600 million barrels with its revenue at $53 million. Nigerian government remodeled its internal market through a series of new laws and mutual agreements to attract potential foreign investors. Multinational oil companies such as Shell Exploration Company, Midwestern Oil, Pan Ocean Oil Corporation, among other multinational oil companies, responded favorably to the new laws and competed to take part in joint venture agreements with the Nigerian government. And of course, by 1975, Nigeria had the fifth largest stock of foreign direct investment in the developing world. Such were the good old days. Now, with the concomitant flow of crude oil and high increase in public revenue, illicit financial flows in form of massive embezzlements of funds, bribery collection, pipeline vandalism, and tax evasion they are even more pronounced in the oil and gas industry today. Channels of illicit financial flows in Nigeria's petroleum industry. There are diverse channels of illicit financial flow. One of them is illegal bunkering. The Human Rights Watch classified it as Nigeria's most profitable private business, where oil is stolen from pipelines by skilled criminals who weld a tap into the channel and siphon oil to nearby vessels on containers. These vessels are usually hidden in small brooks or creeks covered in mangrove forest. And of course, there have been little or no proactive efforts to fight off these illicit acts. We also have transfer pricing, which the tax justice network defined as a tool employed by multinational corporations to shift profits out of the countries where it generally does business into the tax haven where it has to pay very little or no tax on profit. The abuse of this act, as a matter of fact, has been on the radar of the multinational corporation today, and Nigeria is vulnerable to this strategy of tax avoidance because it lacks sufficient information from parent company to understand and arrest transfer pricing crimes and other forms of tax corruption. Last, there's a vicious circle between elected public officials. Government officials, of course, abuse power by awarding oil license to undeserving private oil companies and also hiding under the shadow of anonymous beneficial ownership with the purported aim of collecting humongous bribes and pocketing proceeds from crude oil sales. Now, in the history of oil fraud, there are some politically exposed persons that have been involved in oil crime. Top on the list, we have James Ibu, former governor of Niger Delta State, who looted over $250 million during his 8-year tenure as the governor of Bayelsa State. We also have Nigerian ex-oil minister who was also involved in Marabu oil scandal of $1 billion US. Also have Alison Madueke, Nigerian former ex-oil minister who also sidelined with Dan Eteta to involved in a Malibu oil scandal that happened quite long ago. We also have Farouk Lawan, former Nigerian lawmaker who took 500,000 US dollars bribe from a multinational oil businessman to hide or to remove them from the list of oil defaulters. Now, looking at the magnitude and estimates of oil thefts in Nigeria, a study carried out by the Nigerian Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative shows that crude oil and refined products valued at about 41.9 billion were stolen from Nigeria between 2008 and 2018. A further breakdown of this 41.9 billion includes 38.5 billion on crude oil theft alone, 1.6 billion on domestic crude oil, and another 1.8 billion on refined petroleum products. Estimates from Africa's high-level panel on illicit financial flows revealed that Nigeria lost over 140 billion to illicit financial flows between 2000 and 2014. Furthermore, Nigeria loses about 400,000 barrels of oil, which is valued at 40 million US dollars per day to oil theft. Other estimates produced by private studies have suggested that up to a fifth of Nigeria's daily crude oil production may be lost to theft and vandalism. According to Reuters reports, oil theft accounts for $1 billion in losses in the first quarter of 2022. Data from the National Oil Spill Detection and Responsible Agency, known as NOSTRA, an agency under the Federal Ministry of Environment in Nigeria, recorded a total number of 4,919 oil thefts and about 4.5 trillion oil barrels between 2015 and 2021. Nigeria lost over 1.17 billion US dollars between 2019 and 2014, and 1.5 billion between 2014 and 2016 to unreasonable tax exemptions. These losses, according to Professor Sege, can provide 635.18 kilometers of road, 36 ultra-modern hospitals per state, 183 schools, and capable of educating 3,974 children from primary to tertiary level. If these funds were not stolen, what are the consequential impacts? First is drastic cut in government revenue. The incessant stealing of oil revenue and involvement of artisan refinery continues to reduce government revenue, which also indirectly affects government's capacity to build quality infrastructures for its people. We also have cases of violence and internal strife, which has continued to rage in Niger Delta region, where aggrieved citizens continue to fight government and cause oil explosion in different oil sites in the Niger Delta region. We also have environmental and health hazards implication, and of course, exploitation and impoverishment of individuals. Who are the drivers, or what are the drivers of illicit financial flows in Nigeria's petroleum sector? We have corruption and unbridled passion for illicit wealth, poor compliance and inadequacies of petroleum transparency acts and law, bad eggs among tax officials who are involved in supporting portals, or rather criminals that are involved in the oil scandal. We also have lack of opportunities and youth transition, which force able-bodied men to engage in all forms of crime in order to amass wealth for themselves and their family. And then challenges with beneficial ownership disclosure. In my recommendation, I opine that there should be a collective reforms on transfer pricing policies. Also, there should be international regulation on the Petroleum Transparency Acts and laws, and ensure that all national laws adhere to the stipulation of this international regulation or the stipulation of the International Petroleum Transparency Acts and law. There is need for strict regulation of petroleum industry acts. Nigeria recently introduced Petroleum Industry Act of 2021, but the question remains if we have the will, the comparing will to implement such laws. The government should and other international organizations should work hand in government to ensure that these laws are well implemented and all multinational companies or national companies adhere to these laws. And then there should be digitalized anti-money laundering activities to monitor illicit financial flows in the Nigerian oil and gas sector. There should be tax reforms as well, and of course, should have a well-educated tax personnel who understands the trends in tax and other crimes that will be involved in tax payments in the Nigerian oil and gas sector. There should be collaboration between government agencies and civil society in fighting oil crime in Nigeria. In conclusion, resource-dependent countries like Nigeria over the years have leaked from the sour of decades-long corruption and cronyism that has encroached on our oil and gas sector. This does not only serve as a threat to Nigeria's fragile economy, but also brings great disadvantages to the majority of our citizens. Considering the magnitude of illicit financial flows in Nigerian oil and gas sector, this paper concludes that the intervention of the international community and that of the government of Nigeria are essential in rescuing the crude oil resource from illicit financial flows in Nigeria. The international community, as I said earlier, should create a collective reform that will curtail fraudulent practices on transfer pricing, while the government of Nigeria to improve the mechanism and transparency of beneficial ownership and push for strict regulations of the new Petroleum Industrial Act. Thank you for your attention.